we recommend that you watch the movie before watching our episodes. Hi, welcome back to yet another perspective. We've been speaking about Hera Pheri for the last 3 weeks. We've spoken about the central characters and how they're rooted in theory and in Freud's theory of id-ego, superego. We've spoken about the internal aspects of a psyche and the external reality. We've also spoken about other side characters like the importance of characters like Devi Prasad and the superintendent of police and Kabira. And the last time we spoke about the relevance of songs and how they're so well placed in this movie. Swati, this time I want to talk about sequels. Is there a thing about sequels that just doesn't work, or what do you think happened here?
I wouldn't understand because I'm not a trade analyst or I'm not somebody that's part of the creative process. I am able to look at art only as a spectator and then draw something out of it. So what goes wrong, I wouldn't really know. But I guess there are at times pieces of art which are created from such pure instinct that to recreate them itself becomes a very, very conscious, and you're trying to do justice to the previous one but add a little more flavor. So it becomes a little more artificial in the way that they could be coming across. रमेश सिप्पी जी उन्होंने जब शोले बनाई थी, in one of the interviews he had mentioned that if he were to recreate शोले, maybe it wouldn't happen the way it happened then, because the creative processes are different, your expectations out of that becomes very different. Like we talked about the scene where it was a very gut instinct scene, the number of times that we have seen Jayaji walk in the corridors of the whole thing, and we associated it to how after her family has died, she's just become this little ghost of a person walking around those corridors. So while whether he thought he's trying to depict that, or he just felt right to come back and say, this is Radha's character and this is how much time Radha will take to look at Jay outside, but within herself takes so much time to walk that corridor. So I don't know what was on his mind to have said that, but some pieces of work can be pure instinct. Do they know all the psychology? That part I surely don't think so.
Right, I can relate to that as an artist, right? Like when I'm drawing something or when I'm sketching something out, I may have the most perfect technique and I will make the proportions really right, but sometimes there's just that soul missing, or there's just something missing which I will not be able to put my finger on, and on other times when something just seems so well done, right? Even if I know the technique is off and something. Similarly, like if you go to an art exhibition, if you look at a piece of art, you'll be able to, even if you don't understand it, you'll be able to tell whether you're able to relate to it or not, or whether it's aesthetically pleasing or not. So instinct becomes, like you said, a big part of the creative process, and maybe that's something that becomes forced in a sense, and that could be a reality.
So I think what ends up happening when you look at a writer trying to create something, or a director trying to visualize what will be the backdrop, what will be the music, what will be the characters, other characters who should be visible in scene or not visible in the scene. The more they work with that little bit of gut, right? So it feels right, kind of a thing. So in earlier movies, they've tried to capture it when a writing happened not on laptops but on paper, where a writer is writing, tearing a page and throwing it away, and then writing and throwing it away, and then writing and throwing it away. After that, walking around aimlessly in the room, and then again going back and picking one of those crumpled papers to say, okay, I think this wasn't that bad, let me bring this back. So the writing process, as well as trying to visualize the whole process, in itself is a lot of self-dialogue that they must be having with themselves. And in that self-dialogue, the inner parts become very richer. As part of what we will bring to you also, the appreciation of storytelling and cinema in two forms. One, they're showing the protagonist in the social setting. माँ है, बाप है, भाई है, बहन है, वर्क प्लेस है, गर्लफ्रेंड है, बॉयफ्रेंड है, all of those particular things. So we can look at it in a sociological angle that if at all you're looking at a love story to come true, okay, the kind of interactions that need to happen. So in Hum Tum, for example, the hero had to have a dialogue with his father before he could go and propose to the girl, right? So how relevant his relationship with his father is for him to be able to be in a happy marriage, right? So these are angles which instinctively are present with everybody. Okay. And the more it happens with instinct, maybe sequels only become a little dishonest to the instinct of the writer and the directors. Maybe how I look at it.
Right. We are in. I think it was in Inception that we spoke about. This creative process. It's hard enough already, and when an individual is doing it, it's hard enough already. But within the space of filmmaking, it's so many different people coming together to create something, and you need a buy-in of everyone, right? You need the buy-in of the writer, you need the buy-in of the director, the producer, everyone on the set, and the actors as well. Everyone needs to understand, and instinctually everyone needs to think that it fits, and that's when you're able to sell it for the audience to also relate to it in an honest fashion.
Yes.
And that creative process itself becomes so much more complex in something like filmmaking, just because of the sheer number of people involved within that space.
Yes. And I think it also then falls in that you don't do it only on the basis of understanding. There's also an aspect of trust that we are looking at. In an interview that I was hearing on Interstellar of Sir Michael Caine, he was talking about this as to how initially he thought that he will try and understand the physics of it. And he was trying to discuss with the physicist as to what it is about. And when the physicist told him these boards that are there across, it is only one equation. Sir Caine said that, oh, then I went back to just being this actor. I knew I would not understand it. So I just have to trust the process of the people who are taking me through it. So a lot of times it's not as simple as the buy-in. It could also be the sheer trust that comes in,
Right.
which brings in so many people together to make one thing happen as a reality. So it just talks so beautifully about how we trust, about how we respect, about how we rely on each other. If one department is not doing well, the impact and ripple effect it could have on the other. So while externally there is a world that we rely on, the more instinctually we rely on the inner world. So there could be a voice, for example, कि बच्चे संभलते नहीं हैं तो पैदा क्यों किए, right? Film में they could have used an external character to say that dialogue. But if at all a parent is feeling guilty, that's just a way the parent would be feeling themselves, that I'm not being a good parent, and that is being voiced by another people. So when you're looking at storytelling or making of characters, a lot of them could be voices of your own head, not real characters outside. Like in this film, it's a film about partial heroes. You can't say this one individual is the primary hero whose growth is relevant. They're all very interconnected with each other and either grow together or fight and sit on the sidelines. If they have to grow, they have to come together. So you couldn't have shown an individual graph of change in any manner. So one scene that you also talked about beautifully brings into this as to how, because it's also peppy, this is just a worldview we are talking about, that people who are mature are very different and they're more reliable, and people who are peppy are not reliable. People who are aspirational are not mature or reliable. So when you talk about Raju, he is somebody who's disappeared because he wants to do everything very fast, get his mother out of the vridhashram, to be able to give Khadak Singh the money to do this, to do that, all of those things. And because Ghanshyam is somebody who's constantly judging the world, right hai, wrong hai, good hai, bad hai, he is the one who brings up the question of trust. Can we trust him? and how the ego gets swept away by that. Now, that scene couldn't have been thought and written. It was such an instinctual scene, because if they would have done it the way it was, in the sense कि एक बच्ची को kidnapping से बचाया, but to the real person, you're still a kidnapper. You're still the wrong guy. They would have always had to look behind their shoulder to come back and say, you know, is somebody following us? And that is why the scene needed closure with Raju still relying on Ghanshyam, although Ghanshyam did not rely on him. Raju still relying on Ghanshyam and say, माँ बाहर कार में बैठी है, माँ ने मुझे हथकड़ी में नहीं देखना चाहिए, right? And of course, the dialogue then is said by the ego, saying हमको उधर से मत लेकर जाओ, उधर से लेकर जाओ बाबा. But the reliance has not broken. Once the harmony has come in, they could think differently, but you still find the trust and the reliance. So there could be a question, there is no trust, but it needed to close. Devi Prasad needed to say, ये पैसा मैंने उनको दिया है, right? There needed to be gratitude for them to feel they can hold their head high and move. Right. Otherwise, कर्जे में डूबे हैं, पर अब कर्जे में नहीं डूबे हैं, criminal वाला एक tag लग गया है. So you needed closure to that. So that instinct which would have come about, that Ghanshyam will say, I can't trust him, and the calling of the police for the closure, that can happen with instinct. When you try to do it too consciously, I think we can make a mess of that one.
Right. When you were speaking about storytellers and writers having that better connection with their intuition, I was also thinking about, because the movie, it's such a visual representation of a theoretical concept, right? I was also thinking about how psychologists, in a sense, are not people who have created theories. They were just able to look at something and identify those patterns, because all of us function on that similar ground. Like, we are working with a similar on a similar foundation, and psychologists were just able to give names to identify those patterns and give names to those things. And then writers are now able to take that same foundation, and they're able to tell it in a different way, not in theories, but in the form of movies. So in a way, like, movie makers and psychologists are kind of doing the same work, but in a different way.
Yes. So as a psychologist, I think I might not be able to think that this character here is what is required. But once the character is already placed there by the writer, the psychology is able to pick up the relevance of that particular thing. Because, like we said, there will be no wasted scene or wasted character in a good film. We will have average films to talk about, but yeah, there will be nothing wasted or out of place in that. So psychology takes up a lot from mythology too. So a lot of simplicity, if you were to say something, happens with storytelling, whether it be mythology, whether it be paintings, whether it be the statues and the stories around the temples and the churches and the masjids. All of those things become so relevant. So as a psychologist, I can only salute to art creating people as to how true and honest they are to themselves.
If you're an artist, I would just like to say that, this is my takeaway from our conversation, that if you are an artist or you're a creator of any sort, the interplay between knowledge and instinct is really important. One is not more important than the other. The weighing scale is balanced on this one. And keep creating art and keep watching movies. And we'll see you next time with another movie. If you have any suggestions on which movies you want us to talk about, please leave them in the comments below. And we'll see you next time.